Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of 90 Stories for 90 Years. My name is Mary Osborne, and I serve as the coordinator for Fraternity and Sorority Life here at DePaul. For those of you who are new to this series, 90 Stories is our opportunity to tell the stories of our fraternity and sorority community from faculty, staff, students, alumni, you name it. If they've had an impact on the FSL community, we want to share their story. And that's in honor of our 90th academic year on campus. So it's a really big milestone for us this year. Today we have Maritza Torres with us. Maritza, it's so nice to have you on here.
So nice to be here. Thanks, Mary.
Yeah, of course. Well, we will just go ahead and get started and let you introduce yourself, tell us name, degrees, hometown, chapter affiliation, all of the fun things.
All right. So my name is Maritza Torres, originally from Chicago, Illinois, but currently living in Orlando, Florida. I got involved mostly with DePaul in Greek life with Alpha Phi Lambda, but also within Multicultural Greek Council. I got my bachelor's from DePaul in communication with minors in Spanish and Latin American studies. And then I went all the way to the University of Florida to get a master's in higher education or student personnel in higher education. And then I worked in student affairs for about 5 years. So University of Illinois, after that, University of Miami. And at both of those institutions, I served within student activities, so in that capacity. And then I decided after like a 5-year break from school to go back and get my doctorate, which I completed in 2019 from Florida State University. And so now I work at the University of Central Florida, where I'm an assistant director for our Elite Scholars Academy. And I've been here for 2 years now, and it's been really great. I get to teach leadership classes. I get to develop curriculum. I get to work with some amazing, highly motivated students. And it's kind of like a beautiful combination of like my academic side and my student affairs side. So I definitely say I'm a scholar practitioner for sure because of that experience.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. So it sounds like you've been up to a lot of higher education since graduating from DePaul. Well, thanks so much for sharing all that. Maybe go ahead and kick us off with why you decided to join a fraternity or sorority, and maybe why specifically you chose Alpha Phi Lambda.
Sure. So when I was an undergraduate student at DePaul, I actually commuted all 4 years that I was there. So I never had the opportunity to live on campus. And I think after my freshman year, luckily I connected with a fantastic mentor who I still connect with this day, Ileana Gonzalez. I was involved in STARS. And then through STARS mentoring, through that program, I got to learn about different organizations on campus. I kind of got a little bit more comfortable with navigating DePaul, especially as a first generation student. And so around the second or third quarter of my first year, as I started to go to class, I kept seeing these letters, right? I kept seeing people with letters on, specifically these, especially in my Latin American studies classes. And so I asked about it. I asked what it was. I never thought I would do fraternity sorority life. I always heard bad things. So it's so sad, stereotypes. And like I said earlier, I'm a first generation student. And so I didn't really have kind of like a precedent. And so I decided to talk to one of the members in class to learn more about it. They invited me to an informational. I went and I just fell in love with it. It felt like our chapter of Alpha Phi Lambda felt like a family, a community, and that was definitely something I was looking for because since I commuted, I felt like I never really established a strong friend group, and it's just something that I've always wanted. And so, I mean, long story short, yeah, that's what really attracted me to it. It was really cool to also see them in the same classes that I'm taking. So the whole idea of academics being taken seriously as well, but also this beautiful family and community for students that like look like me or of Latinx descent. So, and the rest is history. So I just really love that and really cherish that.
Yeah, I love that you talk about the familial aspect of fraternity and sorority too. And I think that that's such a powerful tool to helping students connect to campus and making a large campus and a large community seem so much more intimate and smaller and close-knit too. You also have mentioned to me before that Alpha Phi Lambda played a pretty big role in your career in higher education. If you don't mind sharing a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So through Alpha Phi Lambda, I was obviously involved within the fraternity, but I got to get involved within our multicultural Greek council. At the time that MDC and MPHC were one. And through that, I was able to kind of learn more about student affairs, learn more about what these offices do. And it's just more than fraternity and sorority life. It's all these other offices that really just contribute to student life and student engagement on campus. And so because of that, I made sure to involve myself in opportunities. So going to workshops, facilitating those, going to conferences, and luckily we were able to do that as MGC e-board. And I thought it was just really cool that students were able to be in these types of experiences. And at the time, my fraternity sorority advisor and mentor, still to this day, who I love dearly, Dr. Shannon Gray Bar-Milliken, I connected very closely to her and kind of asked her, I'm like, what is your job and how can I do it? Like, this is cool. I like kind of doing this stuff. I love doing this service. I love working with my fellow peers. How do I do this? And so through her, she kind of gave me the background, told me what the actual job description is and what it's called, because I didn't know there was a name for it. I just thought it was like, these are just like grown-ups that work at universities, right? And through her, she kind of gave me, like, explained it to me a little bit. I started looking for grad schools, and honestly, if it wasn't for my involvement with Alpha Phi Lambda, I don't think I would have ever gotten to the point where I'm at today. I'd never anticipated that I would be in a capacity that I am now to actually teach, be a faculty member in a sense. That was never something I thought would happen to me in my future. And so I think being able to experience those leadership experiences as a student and then kind of paying it forward and being able to give those leadership experience to my students, it kind of just goes full circle for me. And so I always credit my involvement in Alpha Phi Lambda for just helping me get here, helping me create that network, but also kind of getting me out of my comfort zone and out of my shell to really embrace like what my strengths are and help me develop them. And so, yeah, that's just a little bit of how it's definitely impacted my career. I am not as involved with my fraternity as much as I would like to now, but I know every campus that I've worked at, I try to advocate for fraternity sorority life. I try to connect with my students who are affiliated or who aren't. And so it brings me a lot of joy when I see students getting involved in other capacities, especially within fraternity sorority life. And so I always try to make that a collaboration or partnership that I have, at least with the office and the administrators at every university that I've worked at. And so that's definitely a goal, and trying to make sure my students know that I am their advocate as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny that you mentioned that your fraternity and sorority advisor was the person who helped you understand. I remember thinking like, oh, I really love doing this whole sorority thing. And like, I hope like, man, it would be really cool to do this someday. And then someone's like, oh, well, you can get paid to do it. And I was like, wait, what? Like, it's someone's job? Like, they
right.
actually, like, do this every day?
Yes.
And I remember thinking, oh, that's so cool. And thinking that it was, you know, just a volunteer opportunity. Well, there are certainly like lots of volunteer opportunities too. I didn't realize it was like a career path until probably like late college. So I definitely understand. I totally understand that. And I very much appreciate you advocating for the fraternity and sorority experience and making those connections. I think that that's one of the most powerful tools that fraternity and sorority communities can use is their peer student affairs professionals on campus, because you know, like there are lots of people with a lot of expertise outside of our area that definitely like assist us in like building better fraternity and sorority communities and healthier fraternity and sorority communities and things like that. So
I agree, because, and I try to bring that stuff up in terms of the student activities background that I have, my involvement in undergrad. I always try to bring that up in some capacity when I'm talking to students or when I'm teaching leadership. Because some of the items or some of the topics that we talk about, I want to make sure that the theories, the foundations that they're learning are also applicable to their current reality. And so I kind of always try to go back. I mean, I feel like I'm more old school now than ever, but I still think in a sense that hopefully that the students kind of can relate, you know, and kind of see like, oh, okay, that Dr. Torres actually knows what we're talking about. Okay, cool. So
yeah. And I think with fraternity and sorority life, it's so interesting because I mean, we have pretty, like, to be honest, like cyclical problems, which can definitely be a challenge, but I also think it makes it easier as a practitioner to like talk to students about it, because it's not
Yeah.
that different from like what we experienced when we were in college. And so really helping them
Right.
like and seeing through their lens, like I think it's something that's
Mhm.
a little bit easier to do because we have, you know, experienced similar challenges. And even though like we may be in a different social culture,
Right.
like the greater societal culture like hasn't changed a lot around some of those like
Exactly.
things that we're dealing with.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So you mentioned to me and earlier that you served as MGC internal vice president and president. So why did you choose to like lead the MGC community? Tell us about that experience.
So funny, and I love this story. So it started with becoming internal vice president, and I didn't even choose that, honestly. And so I remember I was an MGC delegate for my chapter, and I think I was, God, I don't even know how far into like membership I was in APsi. I knew I was still new. I was still in EO. But I remember going to MGC meeting, and then at that meeting, it happened to be like nomination time for the new executive board. And so I'm sitting there like taking notes, not thinking anything of it, because in my head I'm like, oh, you know, I just started. Like I just got my letters. Like I'm still trying to figure this out. And next to me, and it's so funny, I'm gonna make sure he knows I mentioned his name. So David Soler was next to me, and he's a member of Milestone Lambda. And then he looks at me and he's like, Maritza, when do you graduate? I'm like, oh, like in 2-3 years. He's like, okay, I nominate Maritza for internal vice president. And I just looked at him like, what? Like I didn't even get to say anything. He just asked me like if I'll be around, and I was like, yeah. And so I got it. And I mean, I was very nervous and was just like stunned. Like I couldn't stop it. Like I was just like, okay. And so I got it, and through I guess a lot of moral support from my chapter and my brothers and sisters, I stuck with it, and thank God for David for sitting next to me at that MDC meeting, because I think becoming a part of the Multicultural Greek Council really helped shape my leadership development, my leadership skills. I grew more confident in my abilities to like not only communicate, but also be an advocate for my peers. And I just love the idea of all of us coming together, different organizations. And yes, we're different, but at the same time, I feel like a lot of our values are the same. And I thought that was just really cool. And so that happened with my internal vice president part. And I ended my term as internal vice president knowing I wanted to do president my senior year, because I wanted to implement some changes like updating constitution. I felt like after a year with an MGCE board, there were some just things I wanted to do. I still didn't think I made a big enough of an impact, and I wanted to leave something. You know, I wanted to do something, especially my last year in college. And so that's why I decided to become president of MGC, and gracefully they elected me and I got it. And honestly, being MGC president is one of my proudest moments of undergrad. I loved it. I think I still talk about it to this day. And it was just so cool. I never saw myself in that type of position. I know now, you know, at least for me in terms of leadership, titles don't matter, but just knowing like I was a president of something was really big for me. I also wanted to make sure I was a good representation of not only my chapter, but also the fraternity. So having a member of Alpha Phi Lambda also be in that position, it just filled me with a lot of pride, but also I didn't take it for granted. And I wanted to make sure that I was a positive role model, and that I left some sort of impact. And so I honestly, to this day, like even with students at UCF, we have a diverse DGC, I think it's what it's called here. I'm not sure. But even talking to being able to connect with those students is what I hope to do as long as I'm here. But even when I was at Florida State, kind of connecting with my students who were part of MGC organizations, listening to some of the issues that they have, good and bad, and like being like, wow, nothing's changed since I was a student. It's crazy. And so, yeah, that's how it came to be. And I honestly could not think enough for being able to serve in both those roles. I feel very lucky and blessed to have done that. I know I rambled. It's just, I love MGC so much. Like I can't, I can't stress it enough.
No, you do not have to apologize for sharing your love for MGC. I will be honest, it has been such a joy to advise them at UMKC too. So, and I love that you talked about how David I think David is the person you mentioned, kind of tapped you for that first position. I think that that's so common. And I really try to stress this with students that I work with, like tell your peers or nominate your peers or let your peers know that you have faith in them, because that's how people end up more often than not in leadership positions. I can't tell you how many conversations I have with chapter presidents or council presidents who are like, yeah, I had no intention of like leading an organization until someone said, hey, I think you can do this. Or like, kind of like you, like just voluntold you like, hey, I'm going to nominate you like for this. And then they step into that position and they end up doing really phenomenal, like powerful things for the communities that they serve. And all it started with was just like a tap of like, hey, I think you'd be good for this. And that gives you I feel like that gives people so much confidence, or at least it has me in the past too.
Yeah, definitely. And I try to do that now with my students. If I see something in them, I tell them, or if we're in meetings and they're kind of doubting themselves about an organization they want to be a part of or anything else, an internship, I always try to be like, how do you know? Like, how do you know if you don't try? So just like, don't limit yourself. Like, I know you can do this. And so I agree. I think it can be really transformational for someone, because sometimes we don't see what we project, you know, or like what we're capable of. And so having that one person to see that in you means the world. So.
Yeah. And especially if you've never had a leadership position before, right? I think about myself, like before I came to college, like I really wouldn't have called myself like a leader in like I'd never had a formal leadership position. I didn't, so I think that having people say like, oh, I think you'd be good at this. I was like, what, how? I like have never done this before. And that's a really easy way to get your foot, not easy, but a good way to get your foot in the door is like when someone else sees it and you just don't see that in yourself. And then
I agree. Yeah.
Then you end up the internal vice president of MGC and you don't even know how you got there.
I don't even know, but and I think it's so interesting that still sticks with me to this day also. So clearly that was some pivotal moment in my undergraduate career that I'm in my 30s now, that I still remember that day clearly, right? And so I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned your FSL advisor previously, but who is someone who's made an impact on your fraternity and sorority life experience?
Yeah, definitely. Dr. Shannon Graybar Milliken definitely has, but I think also within my fraternity, my line sister, and so I'm actually wearing a shirt that she gave me, so I want to make sure, right here, my captain.
Hey.
Hey. Because clearly it was just the two of us, and to have someone just be with you throughout a process, throughout your time in college, and she's really been one of my number ones to like day one, my ride or die, like I like to say. And so I never had a sister. I have brothers, and so I think her name's Socorro Aguirre. I think with her, I kind of saw that big sister that I've always wanted. And so she's always been a constant supporter, even seeing her as a leader for our chapter and seeing how other students, both within Alpha Phi Lambda and outside, really just looked up to her and admired her and saw her as a mentor was really cool. And so she's definitely one of those people that's impacted my fraternity sorority experience. I think even when it was, like I said, when I got the internal VP, when I became president, she was one of the first people I went to, like, to talk things out. Like, what do you think? Do you think this is a good idea? And also, like, we grew close in the sense that she even knew my family. Like, my parents knew who she was. And it really means a lot to me that, you know, she took the time to just, you know who I am, know what I do, know what's important. And she still does to this day. And so definitely my line sister, Socorro.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I love hearing when people stay connected to their fraternity and sorority brothers and sisters throughout like their life, even post college. And I mean, like, like 10 years post college, like that's a long time to maintain a friendship. And I think that that's a powerful part of fraternity and sorority, that we can foster some of those relationships all the way through. So thank you so much.
I agree, especially because her and I, and just a bunch of my brothers and sisters I still connect with, like, we've moved multiple places, had multiple life milestones, But I know when I go back home to Chicago, especially the ones that are still there, I can sleep over their house. We can hang out like nothing's changed. And that's always really cool to know that you still have this community. And even if they don't live in a home state, if they live in another state, I know I could visit a state and be able to hang out with them too. So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So what are your favorite values of your organization and why?
So actually, I'm going to read it because Alpha Phi Lambda has 8 purposes. Mm-hmm. And so I was looking through them because I'm like, this is perfect because to us, those are our values. That's what we stand by. Mm-hmm. Those are really at least what we strive to be as members, but also as an organization. And I looked at them thinking about me now and what I've learned and what I'm doing now. So actually, one of our 8 purposes that I love and really think I fully embrace now is to enhance the educational experience through social and cultural activities and to assist in the development of members' leadership abilities. And it's funny because I love that now because I consider myself a leadership educator, right? I know the theories, I teach it, I study it. It's basically what I live, eat, and breathe. But reading that now as, I guess, an adult and realizing that there were moments when I was an undergrad that I was able to do that for someone, or I was able to be affiliated with programming, workshops, or anything to that nature that helped increase students' leadership abilities. And the fact that this is now my career and kind of like my calling is kind of creepy. So I was just like, wow, it was actually in our 8 purposes, and then look at me now, right? And not to be conceited, but I think it's just beautiful that I'm able to reflect back on that and think about it. And like, yeah, like as an undergrad, I remember us putting on really beautiful cultural events during Hispanic Heritage Month and going to retreats and workshops and doing all this educational programming and thinking, this is great, awesome to have, people get involved, but I never really realized the impact until I think I left. And so I actually want to like print that out and put it in my office because I feel like being able to see that now where I'm at is kind of like a motivation or like a catalyst to keep doing the work that I'm doing. But I love the idea of leadership. I love knowing that, or being well versed in it in the sense where I think now I know that you don't need a title to be a leader, and really kind of helping students get to that is like one of my goals, and just for them to see the leadership capability within themselves, especially for those from minoritized populations. A lot of my research is on Latinx leadership and identity-based leadership, and so communities of color, et cetera. And I always try to find ways in which I can learn more about their leadership capabilities, but also connect their culture and how, for example, being of Latinx, one of the things that are big within Latinx leadership is family, collaboration, giving back to your community. And so I have students who are very involved with their church or who are, helping their parents take care of their siblings. And to me, and in the literature, that's leadership. But if you think about mainstream definitions, it's not really listed as that, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so like, I try to teach these students kind of like a new framework or a new way of thinking. And I love that I work in an office that's what we try to do. And I feel that leadership studies now is trying to do that for our generations now and try to see that you don't have to be, a president and if you are, that's great. And not to negate that, because that in itself is wonderful, but also kind of making sure that members of an organization feel some sort of purpose and are empowered as well as leaders, if that makes any sense. So
yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. And I actually feel like I just learned something too as an advisor and thinking about advising MGC. I think that's always something, I strive to learn and grow in that and better understanding how to be a better, especially as a white woman, how to be a better advisor to culturally based fraternities and sororities. And so thank you for taking that time to kind of talk through that. Cause I think that there are some things that clicked in my mind too, as you were saying some of that, but it's really, really cool to listen to you talk about the kind of full circle moment of your purposes. And I really hope you put that up on your wall in your office, because I think that's such a cool reflection point to have. And one thing I notice about my own national sororities values is at different points in my life, different like for me, values or different parts of
Right.
things like that connect differently, like depending upon what stage of my life that I'm in. And
Right.
yeah, I just think that that's such a cool full circle moment to hear you talk about.
I also think because as we go through life, sometimes, you know, we can't be as involved as we want to. We love our organizations. We always will be a part of them. But sometimes you kind of forget, right? And so I think being able to revisit that, because you just get lost in life and that's just normal. And just to see and reflect and just take some time to do that, I think is just a beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are coming up on our closing question. So I would love for you to share your favorite memory of being a member of Alpha Phi Lambda.
Oh my God. Okay. I have so many. Let's see. I have so many. Okay. I think one of the ones, okay, I have two. I'm sorry. I have two. Okay. So one is, and it's kind of, it works. I love when I was able to walk through DePaul, whether it's through the Sac Pit, Student Union, anywhere. And if I see these letters, or if I see a bag, because I had a bag with my letters on it, and be able to see someone I knew and just sit down and chill and hang out. And whether it's they're studying, whether it's just taking a break in between classes, it's just, I was really grateful I had that. Because earlier I said I never really had a community when I first started out at DePaul. And so knowing that I built that over time and being able to feel comfortable, feel like campus was home, I think is something that I never took for granted, but I really am grateful for that experience because I know that doesn't come to many students, and I recognize that. And so I just love that, being able to see my brothers and sisters around campus, even being able to see other people that are affiliated from MDC, APsi, Panhandle, and ISC, like peers that I know and that I've met through my leadership experiences around campus. It just made it feel more like home and a little bit smaller, right? And so I just love that. And then I think what I really enjoyed the most also as a member of Alpha Phi Lambda was being able to, I was on programming committee for a few years, and I loved it because we were able to create this really beautiful programs, not only for DePaul and our chapter, but also for our families. And so when I was on programming committee, we started the Gold Rose Gala, which is our end of the year banquet for our families and for us to celebrate the accomplishments of the year. And so being able to be a part of that and kind of to see it unravel and unfold to what it is. I hope they're still doing it, but it was just really cool to be able to play a role in that. And I really enjoyed being on programming committee. I think the people I was with were just fun, really cared, really were motivated and hardworking. And so I love that as well. And then just in general, like after chapter, just hanging out, parking lot conversations, walking to our cars together, like things like that. Like little things, the simplest things really do matter. Yeah. And then I miss DePaul. So this campus, like,
I'm sure really DePaul misses you as well. You are welcome to come back anytime.
I will.
Find yourself back in the Chicagoland. Knock on wood when we are back in person and person experiences. So, well, thank you for sharing all of that. And we had one other 90 Stories interview earlier, and I think sometimes in the big FSL programs, we forget about how big of an impact those small interactions have, like you said, like parking lot conversations or seeing people in, the cafeteria or things like that those are the pieces that make up like the fraternity and sorority experience, right? Like those are the gaps between the large events that most people know fraternity and sorority life for. But those can really have an impact on what build that bridge from undergraduate to post-grad life whenever you're living in the real world. And so I'm glad that you shared all of that.
No, definitely. And it's just really cool, even post-grad or as a professional, if there's people on campus with these letters on. Right now at UCF, we don't have a chapter of Alpha Phi Lambda, but at universities that did, it was really sweet for the students to come out and be like, oh my God, we have an administrator from our chapter. This is great. And so just, I recognize to them, that means a lot to them too. So just making sure that, people know, like, yes, I am I'm affiliated with an organization and if people see my letters, I hope it means something like positive. That makes sense. Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course. And I absolutely love that. I love when their fraternity and sorority life staff member, like not like staff that work with fraternity and sorority life, but people who are members of fraternities and sororities across campus who do wear their letters or who do come to things like new member presentations or leadership like workshops or whatever that looks like in the community, and take that time, because I think it's good for students to see the people who have that experience and who've lived those same same experiences and things like that. So I'm thankful that you do that, even if it's not here at DePaul, but I love that.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we are wrapping up our time here together.
So fast.
Maritza, thank you so much for interviewing with us. This was so fun. Yeah, I've just really enjoyed talking with you today.
No, thank you so much. That went by so fast. But thank you for the opportunity. I cannot credit DePaul and FSL so much for helping me be the person I am today. So I love that I was able to be a part of this. So thank you.
Of course. Thank you. Well, for those of you who are out there, we still have many more stories to tell. So make sure that you tune back in for some more 90 stories for 90 years. But that's all we have for today. So we'll see you all later. Bye.